Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today we're talking about the new EU tariffs on Chinese electric cars. Important to note, these tariffs won't take full effect until October 2024, and until then, China still has time to either negotiate with the EU or adjust its subsidy policies to potentially avoid the tariffs. Let's start.
Stick around until the end of the video, because I'll explain exactly how these new tariffs will impact the prices of vehicles like the Zeekr 001, and why the final price might not be as high as you'd initially expect. Plus, China already has some measures up its sleeve to respond to these tariffs, and since the topic is so extensive, we'll explore those in a second video. So stay tuned, it's going to be an exciting ride. Let's get started. The European Union has long imposed a standard import duty of 10% on all cars imported from non-EU countries. This includes both electric vehicles and traditional combustion engine cars. Now, in addition to these duties, provisional tariffs have been introduced on Chinese electric cars. These tariffs are set to become permanent in October 2024. The new tariffs range from 17% for BYD to 36.3% for SAIC, MG. These tariffs are in addition to the existing 10% import duties, significantly increasing the overall tax burden for the affected manufacturers. These provisional tariffs were introduced in July 2024 after a 9-month investigation aimed at protecting the domestic automotive industry from the massive subsidies provided by the Chinese government. Which manufacturers are affected? Let's take a closer look at the key players. BYD, one of China's largest electric car manufacturers, now faces a 17% tariff. Geely, the parent company of Volvo, faces a 19.3% tariff. SAIC, MG, known for reviving the British MG brand, is hit with the highest tariff at 36.3%. Tesla, although not a Chinese company, also faces a 9% tariff, as the Model 3 is produced in Shanghai. BMW is subject to a 20.8% tariff on its iX3, which is produced in Shenyang, and Cupra faces the same rate for the Tavascan, produced in Anhui. Additionally, we have cooperating firms, 21.3%, and non-cooperating firms, 36.3%. Why were these tariffs introduced? The main reason is the significant subsidies that the Chinese government provides to its auto industry. These subsidies start with raw material extraction for batteries and extend through production and even cover transportation costs. Without this level of state support, Chinese manufacturers wouldn't be able to offer their vehicles at the low prices we see today. The EU views this as a serious threat to its own automotive industry, especially to companies that are still catching up in the electric mobility space. What does this mean for us as consumers and for manufacturers? On one hand, we could see higher prices for electric cars in Europe, especially those imported from China. This might strengthen the competitiveness of European brands like Volkswagen and BMW, which are also heavily investing in electric mobility. On the other hand, Chinese manufacturers might look to build factories directly in Europe or collaborate with European manufacturers to avoid the tariffs. A good example of this is Leapmotor, which has partnered with Stellantis to produce electric cars at a Stellantis factory in Tychy, Poland. This allows Leapmotor to bypass the 21.3% tariffs and offer its vehicles at competitive prices in the European market. Other manufacturers, like BYD, are also working to strengthen their presence in Europe, while Chery, which has been hit with a 21.3% tariff, is planning investments in European factories. These developments could help lower price pressure in the future and create new jobs in Europe at the same time. These tariffs are provisional and remain in place until October 2024. In the meantime, China has the opportunity to adjust its subsidy policies or reach an agreement with the EU. If no solution is found, the tariffs will become permanent from the end of October and will be enforced for 5 years. But that's only one side of the story. The big question remains, how will China respond? In the next video, we'll dive deeper into the possible countermeasures China could take, from retaliatory tariffs to export controls on critical raw materials. Now, let's take a look at how not only Chinese brands but also foreign manufacturers are impacted by these tariffs. Companies like Tesla and BMW, which produce their electric cars in China, are also subject to tariffs. Tesla continues to pay the regular 10% import duty plus an additional 9% tariff, bringing the total tariff burden to 19%. For other manufacturers that collaborate with China, like BMW with the iX3 and Cupra with the Tavascan, the tariff rate is 20.8%. This highlights just how interconnected global supply chains are and how even major European manufacturers are heavily reliant on Chinese production. And now, let's look at a particularly interesting example, the Zeekr 001. This car is originally priced at around 60,000 euros. At first glance, you might think that the 19.3% tariff would push the price up to 72,000 euros. That's pretty steep, right? But wait, here's the twist: the tariffs are not applied to the retail price, but to the so-called customs value, which is likely somewhere between 30,000 euros and 40,000 euros. So, if we assume the customs value of the Zeekr 001 is around 35,000 euros, the 19.3% tariff would amount to roughly 6,755 euros. This means the final price of the Zeekr 001 could end up closer to 67,000 euros, rather than the expected 72,000 euros. This really shows how complex these calculations can be and why it's important to understand these details before jumping to conclusions. But what do these tariffs mean for the wider market? Looking ahead, these tariffs will likely reshape the global competition in the electric vehicle market. On one side, the EU will aim to strengthen its own production and reduce dependence on China. On the other side, Chinese manufacturers will surely look for ways to maintain or even grow their market share in Europe. Perhaps we'll soon see more Chinese factories in Europe, not only avoiding tariffs but also putting further pressure on local manufacturers.
That's it for today. We've explained the new EU tariffs and their impact on the market. But this topic isn't far from over. In the next video, we will dive deeper into how China might respond to these tariffs and what measures we could expect to see. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. See you next time. Bye bye.